The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction, and its ceiling disappeared into clouds of swirling purple gas that glowed with ancient energy. 47 different species had sent their ambassadors to this meeting, and they sat in floating chairs that circled around a central platform made of pure light. High Arbiter Theseus stood at the center of this platform, his body made entirely of living crystal that shifted colors with his emotions. He had ruled the Velanthari hegemony for 3,000 cycles, and in all that time, he had never felt the need to issue a warning as serious as the one he was about to give. The newest members of the council were the Crixvan, an insectoid species with sharp mandibles and 6 arms that clicked together when they spoke. Their ambassador, a large creature covered in dark green armor plates, stepped forward with confidence that bordered on arrogance. "We have discovered a planet rich with resources," the Crixvan ambassador announced, his voice buzzing through the translation devices that everyone wore. "The primitive species living there calls it Earth, and they are weak and soft and completely unprepared for conquest." A murmur passed through the assembled delegates, but it was not the murmur of approval that the Crixvan had expected. Instead, several of the older species shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and some even looked away as if the very mention of that planet brought back terrible memories. "We propose a full invasion," the ambassador continued, unaware of the tension building around him. "Our scouts have observed these humans for many cycles, and they possess only basic technology. They cannot travel faster than light. They fight wars among themselves constantly, and their bodies are fragile and easy to destroy. This will be a simple conquest that will bring great wealth to the hegemony." High Arbiter Theseus raised one crystalline hand, and the entire chamber fell silent in an instant. The colors in his body shifted from calm blue to deep red, a sign that every species in the room recognized as extreme displeasure. "The humans are not to be touched," Theseus declared, his voice echoing through every mind in the chamber, through telepathic amplification. "This is not a suggestion or a recommendation. This is the absolute law of the Galactic Council, and any species that violates this law will face immediate expulsion from the hegemony." The Crixvan ambassador clicked his mandibles in confusion and disbelief. He had expected praise for finding such an easy target, not threats and warnings. He looked around at the other delegates, hoping to find support, but every face he saw showed only fear and grim understanding. "I do not understand this decision," the ambassador protested, his 6 arms spreading wide in a gesture of challenge. "We are the mighty Velanthari hegemony, rulers of 12,000 star systems. We have conquered species far more advanced than these primitive humans. Why do we fear creatures who cannot even leave their own solar system without taking generations to reach the nearest star?" An ancient delegate from the Morphery species, beings made of flowing liquid metal, let out a sound that might have been bitter laughter. "You know nothing, young one," the Morphery said. "You see only what your scouts have shown you, but you do not see the truth that lies beneath the surface." "What truth?" the Crixvan demanded. "I see a species ripe for conquest, nothing more." Theseus moved closer to the insectoid ambassador, and the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop by several degrees. The High Arbiter's crystalline eyes locked onto the Crixvan, with an intensity that made the proud warrior want to step backward. 300 cycles ago, the Velanthari made the same mistake you are proposing now," Theseus said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "We looked at the humans and saw what you see: weakness, primitiveness, easy prey. We sent our greatest armada to conquer their world, and we believe victory would take mere days." The Crixvan ambassador tilted his head, curious despite his fear. "What happened to your armada?" "It was destroyed," Theseus answered, and the words hung in the air like a death sentence. 3,000 warships carrying 2 million of our finest soldiers descended upon Earth, and fewer than 400 ships escaped. The rest were captured, destroyed, or crashed into the very planet we sought to conquer. Gasps echoed through the chamber from the younger species who had not heard this history. The Crixvan ambassador took an involuntary step backward, his confidence finally beginning to crack. "That is impossible," he whispered. "No primitive species could defeat such a force." "We thought the same thing," Theseus replied. "We learned the hard way that the humans are not like any other species in the galaxy. They do not surrender when they should surrender. They do not accept defeat even when defeat is certain. They fight with a fury and determination that defies all logic and reason." The High Arbiter gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed images of Earth, a beautiful blue and green world that looked peaceful and inviting. Then the images changed to show burning Velanthari ships falling from the sky. Human soldiers charging into battle against impossible odds. And the terrified faces of Velanthari commanders as they realized their invasion had become a disaster. "The humans have a concept they call total war," Theseus continued. "When threatened, they do not simply send their soldiers to fight. Every single member of their species becomes a warrior. Farmers build bombs, teachers become assassins, children carry messages for resistance fighters. They turn their entire civilization into a weapon, and they do not stop fighting until the enemy is completely destroyed." The Crixvan ambassador stared at the horrific images, his mandibles hanging open in shock. He watched as human fighters, bleeding and broken, continued to attack Velanthari positions with weapons made from scrap metal and stolen technology. He saw the bodies of his own kind piled in the streets of human cities, killed by traps and ambushes in sheer, overwhelming numbers. "We came to Earth as conquerors," Theseus said, closing the holographic display. "We left as survivors, grateful to escape with our lives. And in the centuries since that day, the humans have only grown stronger. They have taken our technology, improved upon it, and built their own ships that can now travel between stars. They watch us, Ambassador. They remember what we did, and they are waiting to see if anyone is foolish enough to attack them again." The chamber was completely silent as every delegate absorbed this terrible warning. The Crixvan ambassador lowered his arms and bowed his head in submission. "I withdraw my proposal," he said quietly. "We will not attack the humans." "A wise decision," Theseus replied. "Now sit and listen, and I will tell you the full story of what happened on Earth 300 cycles ago. Every species in this chamber must understand why the humans are never to be touched, and why this law exists for our protection, not theirs." The delegates settled into their seats as the High Arbiter began his tale, and the younger species prepared to learn the most important lesson in galactic history: never underestimate humanity. 300 cycles before the Galactic Council meeting, Commander Sci-Fi stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the blue planet called Earth with complete confidence in his victory. His fleet stretched across the darkness of space like a swarm of silver insects. 3,000 warships armed with weapons that could melt mountains and shields that could stop nuclear explosions. "Begin the invasion," Sci-Fi commanded, his four eyes narrowing with anticipation. "I want every major population center under our control within one rotation of their planet." The Velanthari ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, and the humans looked up at the sky with terror in their hearts. Their primitive radar systems had detected the alien fleet only hours before, and their governments had barely enough time to issue warnings before the first attacks began. Energy beams lanced down from the ships and struck military bases across the planet. Tanks melted into pools of liquid metal, aircraft exploded in midair, and soldiers died by the thousands before they could even raise their weapons. The humans had never faced an enemy like this, and their defenses crumbled like paper walls against a flood. Within 6 hours, Commander Sci-Fi received reports of surrender from 12 major nations. The human leaders appeared on communication screens with pale faces and trembling voices, begging for mercy and promising complete cooperation. Sci-Fi smiled at their weakness and accepted their surrender with contempt in his heart. "This is even easier than we predicted," his second officer reported with satisfaction. "The humans are cowards who break at the first sign of superior force. We will have this planet secured within days." Sci-Fi nodded in agreement and ordered his troops to begin the occupation. Millions of voluntary soldiers marched through the streets of human cities, and the people watched them pass with fear and hatred burning in their eyes. The conquest of Earth seemed complete, and Sci-Fi began planning the extraction of the planet's resources. But something strange happened on the third day of the occupation. A voluntary patrol in a region called Eastern Europe disappeared without any communication. Sci-Fi assumed it was a technical malfunction and sent another patrol to investigate. That patrol also vanished, and when a third group arrived at the location, they found only the burned wreckage of vehicles and the bodies of their comrades. Who did this? Sci-Fi demanded when the report reached his flagship. "The human military has been neutralized." "We do not know, Commander," his intelligence officer admitted with confusion. "There are no human military units in that area. Our scanners show only civilians." More attacks followed in the next few days. Supply convoys were ambushed on roads that had been declared safe. Bombs exploded in buildings where voluntary officers were staying. Soldiers on guard duty were found dead with their throats cut, killed silently in the night by attackers who left no trace. The humans who had surrendered were fighting back, but not in any way the voluntary had ever seen before. These were not soldiers in uniforms following orders from generals. These were farmers and shopkeepers and teachers and students, ordinary people who had decided that death was better than slavery. An old woman in a place called France planted explosives under a bridge and destroyed an entire column of voluntary vehicles. A teenage boy in Russia used a hunting rifle to kill 3 officers from a rooftop before disappearing into the forest. A group of factory workers in America captured a voluntary soldier, took apart his weapon, and built copies that they distributed to their neighbors. Sci-Fi called an emergency meeting with his officers to address the growing crisis. "How is this possible?" he roared, slamming his fist against the table. "We destroyed their armies. We killed their leaders. Why are they still fighting?" His psychological warfare expert, a thin voluntary named Calix, stepped forward with a troubled expression. "Commander, I have been studying the humans extensively, and I believe I understand what is happening. These creatures do not think like any species we have encountered before." "Explain yourself," Sci-Fi demanded. "When we conquer a planet, the native species typically accepts defeat and submits to our rule," Calix explained. "They understand that resistance is futile and that cooperation will lead to better treatment. This is logical, and it is how every intelligent species should behave." "And the humans?" Sci-Fi asked with growing dread. "The humans do not care about logic," Calix replied. "They have a concept that they call freedom, and many of them consider this concept more valuable than their own lives. They would rather die fighting than live as slaves, even when fighting means certain death." Sci-Fi stared at his officer with disbelief. "That is insanity." "Perhaps," Calix agreed, "but it is a very effective kind of insanity. Every time we kill one of these resistance fighters, their friends and family members become more determined to fight. We are not crushing their will to resist. We are strengthening it." The next few months proved Calix's analysis correct in the most painful ways possible. The resistance grew from scattered attacks to coordinated campaigns that struck at voluntary forces across the entire planet. The humans shared information, weapons, and tactics through networks that the aliens could not detect or disrupt. A particularly devastating blow came when human hackers infiltrated the Voluntari communication system and broadcast false orders that sent 3 entire divisions marching into ambushes. By the time the commanders realized what had happened, thousands of soldiers were dead and the survivors were fleeing in panic. Commander Sci-Fi watched the casualty reports with horror growing in his heart. He had arrived on Earth with 2 million soldiers, and in just 8 months, he had lost nearly half of them. The humans showed no signs of stopping their attacks, and his remaining forces were becoming afraid to leave their fortified bases. "We need reinforcements," Sci-Fi finally admitted to his officers. "Send a message to the homeworld. Tell them that the humans are more dangerous than we anticipated, and we require additional ships and soldiers to complete the conquest." The message was sent, and Sci-Fi waited anxiously for a response. He told himself that the hegemony would send help, that the might of the Voluntari would eventually crush these stubborn humans, and that victory was still possible if he could just hold on a little longer. But as he watched another supply depot explode in flames on his tactical display, Commander Sci-Fi began to wonder if he had made the worst mistake in the history of his species. The humans were not surrendering, they were not being crushed, and they seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. Somewhere on the planet below, resistance fighters were already planning their next attack, and they had no intention of stopping until every single alien invader was dead or gone. 80 months had passed since the invasion began, and Commander Sci-Fi no longer recognized the confident leader he had once been. His eyes were hollow, his crystal skin had lost its shine, and his movements were slow and exhausted. The war on Earth had broken something inside him that would never heal. The reinforcements from the homeworld had never arrived. The Hegemony Council had reviewed his reports and decided that sending more ships to Earth would be a waste of resources. They ordered Sci-Fi to continue the occupation with his remaining forces, but everyone knew this was a death sentence disguised as an order. Of the 2 million soldiers who had landed on Earth, fewer than 300,000 remained alive. The rest had died in ambush, bombings, raids, and the countless small attacks that happened every single day. The survivors huddled in fortified bases, afraid to venture outside, while the human resistance grew bolder and more powerful. Then, the humans launched their counterattack. It began on a night that the humans called the Spring Equinox. Across the entire planet, resistance forces attacked Voluntari positions simultaneously. The coordination was flawless, the timing perfect, and the fury unstoppable. Bases that had seemed secure exploded into flames as human fighters breached their defenses and poured inside. Sci-Fi watched the disaster unfold from his flagship in orbit. His tactical display lit up with warning signals as base after base went dark. Communications flooded with desperate calls for help, screams of dying soldiers, and the terrible silence that followed. How did they organize this? His second officer shouted over the chaos. "We monitored all their communications." They did not use communications we could monitor, Sci-Fi realized with horrible clarity. They planned this face-to-face, passing messages by hand, using methods we could not detect. They have been preparing this for months, perhaps since the beginning. But the ground assault was only the first part of the human plan. The real shock came when Sci-Fi's sensors detected something impossible. Ships rising from the surface of Earth, heading straight for the Voluntari fleet. "That cannot be right," his sensor officer stammered. "Humans do not have space combat capability." "They do now," Sci-Fi said quietly, watching the impossible become reality on his display. The human ships were crude and ugly compared to the elegant Voluntari vessels. They were built from scrap metal, crashed alien ships, and technology that humans had stolen and modified. They should not have been able to fly, let alone fight in space. But they flew, and they fought with the same terrible determination that had defined the entire war. The first wave of human ships slammed into the voluntary defensive perimeter with no regard for their own survival. They were piloted by volunteers who knew they would probably die, and they charged forward anyway. Their weapons were primitive, their shields were weak, but they attacked with such ferocity that the alien gunners could not track them all. 3 voluntary cruisers exploded in the opening minutes of the battle. The humans lost dozens of ships, but more kept coming, rising from the planet in an endless stream of defiance. They had been building these vessels in secret for over a year, hiding them in caves and underground bunkers and abandoned factories. Sci-Fi ordered his fleet to concentrate fire on the largest human vessels, but this left the smaller ships free to slip through the gaps. Human boarding parties crashed into voluntary ships, cutting through hulls with stolen plasma torches and pouring inside with weapons blazing. The sounds of combat echoed through Sci-Fi's flagship as human fighters battled through the lower decks. His security teams tried to stop them, but the humans fought like demons, advancing through corridors filled with fire and smoke. For every human who fell, another took their place, stepping over the bodies of their comrades without hesitation. A massive explosion shook the ship as human saboteurs destroyed the main engine room. Power flickered throughout the vessel, and Sci-Fi knew that his flagship was dying. He ordered an evacuation, but there was nowhere to evacuate to. The battle raged all around them, and escape pods were being shot down as fast as they launched. Then the bridge doors exploded inward, and Sci-Fi found himself facing the enemy for the first time. She was a human female, small and fragile-looking by voluntary standards. Her armor was cracked and burned, blood streamed from wounds on her face and arms, and her weapon was empty. She held nothing but a jagged piece of metal torn from the broken door, a makeshift blade that should have been no threat to an armed commander. But her eyes burned with a fire that Sci-Fi had never seen in any creature. There was no fear in those eyes, no hesitation, no mercy. Only absolute determination, and something that might have been joy. Why? Sci-Fi asked through his translator, genuinely curious even as death approached. Why you keep fighting? You cannot win against the entire hegemony. Even if you defeat us here, more will come. The human female smiled, and Sci-Fi understood in that moment why his species had failed. The smile showed her teeth, a gesture that humans use to express happiness, but that looked like a predator preparing to feed. She was bleeding, exhausted, and facing an enemy twice her size, and she was smiling. "We do not need to win forever," she said, her voice steady despite her injuries. "We just need to make sure that you lose today. And tomorrow, we will fight again. And the day after that, we will keep fighting until there are no more invaders left, or until there are no more humans left to fight. Either way, this is our world, and we will never give it up." She lunged at him with impossible speed, and Sci-Fi barely managed to raise his weapon before she was on him. The metal blade found the gap between his armor plates, and pain exploded through his body. He fired blindly, and the human fell, but she took him down with her, and they crashed to the floor together in a tangle of blood and crystal. Sci-Fi would survive that wound, though barely. But as he lay on the ruined bridge of his dying flagship, watching the battle through flickering view screens, he knew that the war was over. The humans had won. The voluntary retreat was not orderly. It was a rout, a desperate flight from a planet that had become a death trap. Ships that could still fly abandoned their positions and fled toward the edge of the solar system, pursued by human vessels that showed no interest in accepting surrender. Of the 3,000 warships that had come to conquer Earth, fewer than 400 escaped. The rest were destroyed, captured, or crashed onto the planet below. The greatest military force the hegemony had ever assembled had been annihilated by a species they had dismissed as primitives. Commander Sci-Fi was among the survivors, carried to safety by officers who found him bleeding on his bridge. He would spend the rest of his long life wondering if survival was truly a mercy, or just a prolonged punishment for his arrogance. The humans did not pursue the fleeing fleet beyond their solar system. They had made their point, and they had no interest in conquest. But as the survivors limped home to face the judgment of the hegemony, they carried with them a message that would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. Earth was not a prize to be taken. It was a trap that had destroyed the mightiest fleet in known space. And the humans who lived there were not primitives to be conquered, but predators who had just proven that they could defend their world against any enemy. The age of human isolation was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Sci-Fi could not sleep anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of dead soldiers and burning ships. The invasion that was supposed to take days had now stretched into its 10th month, and the situation grew worse with every passing week. He summoned his chief scientist, a brilliant Voluntari named Meraxis, to his private quarters. "I need to understand these creatures," Sci-Fi demanded. "Why do they keep fighting when any rational species would have surrendered long ago? What makes them so different from every other species we have conquered?" Meraxis had spent months studying captured humans and analyzing their biology, their history, and their psychology. The data he had collected painted a picture so terrifying that he had hesitated to share it with the commander. But now he had no choice. The humans are what scientists call persistence predators. Meraxis began projecting holographic images of human anatomy. On their planet, they evolved not to be the strongest or the fastest creatures, but to be the most enduring. They would chase their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Sci-Fi studied the images with growing unease. "What does this mean for us?" "It means they never stop," Meraxis explained. "Their bodies are designed to keep going long after other creatures would give up. They can suppress pain, ignore injuries, and continue functioning even when badly damaged. And their minds are built the same way as their bodies." The scientists showed more data on the holographic display. Humans produce a chemical called adrenaline when they are threatened. This chemical gives them temporary strength and speed far beyond their normal abilities. It also makes them aggressive and reduces their fear of death. When humans are fighting for their survival, they become extremely dangerous. "But surely they must tire eventually," Sci-Fi argued. "No creature can fight forever." "You would think so," Meraxis agreed. "But there is another factor that makes humans unique. Look at their history, Commander." The display changed to show thousands of years of human civilization, and Sci-Fi felt his blood turn cold. The humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. War after war after war, stretching back to the very beginning of their recorded history. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet, and they had come close to using them multiple times. "They call this period the Cold War," Meraxis explained, highlighting one particular era. Two groups of humans pointed thousands of nuclear weapons at each other for decades. Either side could have destroyed all life on Earth, but instead of making peace, they simply accepted the risk. They have a term for this: mutually assured destruction. They considered it a reasonable strategy. Sci-Fi shook his head in disbelief. "They are insane. Completely and totally insane." "Perhaps," Meraxis said, "but their insanity has made them the most adaptable and resilient species we have ever encountered. They have survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and countless wars. Nothing has been able to destroy them, not even themselves." The scientists pulled up more data showing human social behavior. There is also the matter of their emotional bonds. Humans form connections with each other that defy all logic. A human will die to protect a stranger they have never met. They will sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts like honor, freedom, and justice. They feel emotions so strongly that they will fight to the death over ideas that exist only in their minds. This is a weakness, Sci-Fi insisted. We can exploit their emotions to control them. We tried that, Meraxis reminded him grimly. We took hostages and threatened to kill them unless the resistance surrendered. Do you remember what happened? Sci-Fi remembered. The resistance had not surrendered. They had attacked with even greater fury. The humans had accepted the deaths of their loved ones rather than submit to alien rule, and then they had sworn revenge that they pursued with terrifying dedication. The humans also adapt faster than any species we have encountered, Meraxis continued. Our energy weapons were highly effective in the first week of the invasion. Within 2 months, human engineers had developed reflective armor that neutralized our beams. Our communication frequencies were secure when we arrived, but human hackers cracked our encryption within weeks. Meraxis showed images of human laboratories where captured voluntary technology was being taken apart and studied. They are learning from us, Commander. Every piece of equipment we lose, they examine and copy. Civilians with no military training are building weapons based on our technology, and their versions are sometimes better than the originals. Sci-Fi stared at the images with horror. He saw humans reverse engineering anti-gravity generators, modifying energy weapons, and even attempting to repair captured spacecraft. These were not trained scientists working in proper facilities. These were ordinary people working in basements and garages with basic tools. How is this possible? He whispered. Humans are tool users to an extent we have never seen before, Meraxis explained. Their entire evolution has been shaped by their ability to create and modify technology. What takes our scientists years to develop, humans can figure out in weeks through pure determination and creativity. The scientist's expression grew even more grave. Commander, I must tell you something that our psychological experts have discovered. The humans are not just fighting to survive anymore. They are fighting to win. They believe they can actually defeat us, and this belief is growing stronger every day. That is ridiculous, Sci-Fi scoffed, though his voice lacked conviction. We still have superior numbers and technology. Our numbers are shrinking rapidly, Meraxis pointed out. And our technological advantage is disappearing as they learn from us. But there is something even more concerning. The humans are beginning to coordinate on a global scale. Nations that were enemies before our invasion are now working together. They are sharing resources, intelligence, and weapons. They call themselves the United Terran Defense Force, and they are planning something big. Sci-Fi felt a chill run through his crystalline spine. What kind of something? We do not know yet, Meraxis admitted. But our intelligence suggests they are building ships. Not the slow generation vessels they had before, but faster ships based on our own technology. Commander, if they succeed in launching those ships, they will be able to attack us in orbit. We will lose our last advantage. The commander sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. The humans were not just dangerous. They were a force of nature, as unstoppable as a storm and as adaptable as water. Every strategy the Voluntari had used against them had failed, and every failure had only made the humans stronger. What do you recommend? Sci-Fi finally asked. Meraxis hesitated before answering. Commander, I recommend we consider withdrawal. These creatures cannot be conquered. Every attempt to break them only makes them more determined. If we stay here much longer, I fear we will lose everything. Sci-Fi wanted to argue, wanted to insist that the mighty Voluntari could not be defeated by primitive apes on a backwater planet. But the evidence was overwhelming, and deep in his hearts, he knew that Meraxis was right. The question was whether the hegemony would accept such a humiliating retreat, or whether they would send reinforcements and doom even more soldiers to die on this cursed world. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had fallen into complete silence as High Arbiter Thisnus finished his tale. Every delegate sat frozen in their seats, processing the horror of what they had just heard. The younger species stared with wide eyes, while the older ones nodded grimly at memories they had tried to forget. The Crixvan ambassador had turned so pale that his normally dark green carapace now looked almost white. His mandibles clicked nervously as he tried to find words, any words, to respond to the terrifying history lesson he had just received. "That was 300 cycles ago," he finally managed to say. "Surely the situation has changed since then. Perhaps the humans have become more peaceful, more willing to negotiate." Theseus made a sound that might have been laughter, though it carried no joy. "The situation has changed, Ambassador, but not in the way you hope. Allow me to show you what has happened in the centuries since our defeat." The holographic display activated again, showing images that made the assembled delegates gasp. Human ships now patrolled the outer reaches of their solar system, sleek vessels that bore no resemblance to the crude craft that had first attacked the Valentari fleet. These were warships designed by engineers who had spent 3 centuries studying captured alien technology and improving upon it. "The humans have not been idle," Theseus explained. "They established colonies on other worlds in their system, built massive orbital stations, and created a military force that rivals some of the older hegemony species. But most importantly, they have been watching us." More images appeared, showing human observation posts hidden throughout the galaxy. The humans had sent probes to every major star system, monitoring communications, tracking fleet movements, and learning everything they could about their neighbors. "They know where our worlds are," Theseus continued. "They know the strength of our fleets. They have mapped our trade routes and identified our weaknesses. If any species attacks Earth again, the humans will not simply defend their homeworld. They will strike back at the attacker's home system." The Morphery delegate spoke up, his liquid metal body rippling with agitation. "Tell them about the message, High Arbiter. Tell them what the humans sent us 50 cycles after the invasion." Theseus nodded and activated a recording that every species in the hegemony had been required to study. A human male appeared on the display, gray-haired and covered in scars that told the story of a life spent fighting. Despite his age, his eyes were sharp and alert, and his voice carried the weight of authority. "Greetings, neighbors," the human said, with a pleasant smile that did not reach his eyes. "My name is Admiral Chine Wei, and I speak on behalf of the United Earth Government. We have noticed that your species has been keeping your distance from our system since what we call the Liberation War. We appreciate your caution, and we want you to know that we harbor no desire for revenge." The Admiral's expression grew more serious. "We are not conquerors. We have no interest in invading your worlds or enslaving your people. What happened on Earth was defensive, nothing more. We were attacked, we defended ourselves, and we won. That is the end of the story as far as we are concerned." "However," Admiral Chum continued, and his voice took on a harder edge, "we want to be absolutely clear about one thing. If any species attacks Earth again, our response will be swift and devastating. We have spent the decades since the liberation building ships, weapons, and defenses. We have studied your technology and surpassed it in many areas. We are no longer the primitive world you thought you could conquer." The Admiral leaned forward, and the smile returned to his face, though it now looked more like the baring of teeth. "Come to our world in peace, and we will welcome you as friends. We have much to offer: art, music, literature, scientific discoveries, and perspectives that no other species in the galaxy possesses. We would love to trade with you, learn from you, and share our culture with yours. But come in war," the Admiral said, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "and we will destroy you. Not just your invasion fleet, but your homeworld, your colonies, your entire civilization. We do not make threats lightly, and we do not forget our enemies. This is not a bluff, and it is not an exaggeration. Attack us, and you will be erased from the galaxy." The recording ended, and the council chamber remained silent for a long moment. The Crixvan ambassador looked like he wanted to crawl under his seat and hide. "That message was sent 250 cycles ago," Theseus said quietly. "Since then, 3 minor species have ignored our warnings and attempted to raid human shipping. None of those species exist anymore." "What happened to them?" a young delegate asked with trembling voice. "The humans destroyed them," Theseus answered simply. "Not their fleets, not their military installations, but their entire civilizations. Their homeworlds are now dead rocks. Their colonies are abandoned ruins, and their people are scattered refugees with no hope of rebuilding. The humans were true to their word. They do not forget, and they do not forgive." The Crixvan ambassador rose from his seat on shaking legs. "We understand now, High Arbiter. The Crixvan will never threaten the humans. We will approach them only in peace, if we approach them at all." "A wise decision," Theseus said. "But there is more you should know. The humans are actually quite welcoming to species that deal with them honestly. They have established trade agreements with several hegemony members, and those agreements have been profitable for everyone involved." The High Arbiter gestured, and new images appeared showing human and alien merchants exchanging goods, scientists collaborating on research projects, and diplomats signing treaties. The humans are curious, creative, and generous when they are treated with respect. They have contributed technologies that have benefited the entire hegemony, and they have helped resolve disputes between species without resorting to violence. "They are complicated beings," Theseus continued, "capable of terrible destruction, but also capable of great kindness. They will fight to the death to protect their freedom, but they will share their last meal with a stranger in need. They hold grudges for generations, but they also forgive enemies who showed genuine remorse." The Morphery delegate spoke again. "The humans have a phrase that captures their nature perfectly: speak softly and carry a big stick. They prefer peace, but they are always ready for war. They hope for friendship, but they prepare for betrayal. This is how they have survived in a hostile galaxy, and this is why they remain undefeated." Theseus nodded in agreement. "The law regarding humans exists for our protection, not theirs. We could send every ship in the hegemony to Earth, and we might eventually defeat them through sheer numbers. But the cost would be catastrophic, and the humans would make us pay for every inch of ground. By the time we claimed victory, we would have nothing left worth celebrating." The High Arbiter looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. "Remember this lesson, all of you. The humans are not our enemies unless we make them our enemies. They are potential allies, potential trading partners, and potential friends. But if we threaten them, they will become the most dangerous force this galaxy has ever known. The choice is ours to make, and I strongly suggest we choose wisely." The council session ended with a unanimous vote to maintain the law protecting Earth from invasion. The Crixvan ambassador was the first to cast his vote in favor, and he left the chamber with a new understanding of his place in the galaxy. As he walked through the corridors of the council station, he passed a viewport that looked out into the endless expanse of space. Somewhere out there, in a small yellow star system, the humans were watching and waiting. They had built their ships, trained their soldiers, and prepared their defenses. They hoped for peace, but they were ready for war. And the galaxy had learned, through blood and fire and the destruction of entire civilizations, that there was only one safe way to deal with humanity: never attack the humans. No one survives